You probably think of the Ford Galaxie 500 as just another classic from the golden age of American cars. But what if I told you this big, shiny cruiser was hiding a 7-liter beast under the hood, the kind of power that could smoke muscle cars, outrun criminals, and still carry a family of 5 across the country in comfort?
Yeah, this wasn't just a car. It was a symbol.
A full-size statement of strength, style, and speed, built for an era that believed bigger was better and chrome was king. It roared down highways, patrolled streets in black and white, and even wore a vinyl tuxedo while rust quietly crept beneath the surface. From bizarre engineering quirks like windshield wipers that quit mid-storm, to column-mounted shifters that felt more like a secret handshake than a gear change, the Galaxie 500 wasn't just built, it was engineered with character. And its name? That wasn't an accident either. Ford launched this machine during the height of the space race, betting that Americans didn't just want a car, they wanted a spacecraft for the open road. So buckle up, because we're about to peel back the layers of chrome, rust, and horsepower to reveal the forgotten power, strange quirks, and untold legacy of the Ford Galaxie 500. 1. The hidden muscle beneath the chrome. At first glance, the Ford Galaxie 500 looked like a polite, full-size cruiser, something you'd expect to see parked neatly in a suburban driveway or gliding down Main Street on a Sunday. But beneath that wide, gleaming hood, Ford was hiding a monster. In the mid to late 1960s, Ford offered a jaw-dropping option, a 7.0-liter V8 engine, that's 428 cubic inches of raw Detroit muscle. This wasn't some gimmick or badge-only performance. This thing could crank out over 345 horsepower, with enough torque to snap your head back at the green light. This wasn't just power for bragging rights. The Galaxie 500 could legitimately hold its own against dedicated muscle cars of the era. While everyone drooled over Mustangs, GTOs, and Chargers, the Galaxie was quietly outrunning expectations, all while hauling 5 full-grown adults and a trunk packed for a weekend getaway. And if you were feeling bold, Ford let you pick your poison, a smooth automatic transmission for easy cruising or a 4-speed manual that gave you full control of the beast. Imagine rowing through gears in a giant steel land yacht that moved like a street fighter. It was absurd, and yet, somehow, totally brilliant. This was the paradox of the Galaxie 500, family car on the outside, performance car in disguise.
But the surprises didn't stop there.
Next up, the windshield wipers that quit when you needed them most. 2. The windshield wipers that quit mid-storm. You're barreling down the highway, rain starting to pour, and suddenly, your windshield wipers just give up. No, it's not a horror story, it was just life with the early Ford Galaxie 500. Unlike modern cars with reliable electric motors, early Galaxies used a vacuum-powered windshield wiper system. That's right, the same engine vacuum used to power other components under the hood was responsible for moving the wipers.
It worked, sort of, until you hit the gas.
The moment you stepped on the accelerator, whether you were passing a slower car or climbing a hill, engine vacuum dropped, and so did the wiper performance.
Sometimes they slowed to a crawl. Sometimes they stopped completely.
And if it started raining during a hard overtake, good luck seeing where you were going. It sounds ridiculous today, but back then, it was a common setup in American cars. Quirky, inconvenient, and downright dangerous, but totally normal for the time. Ford eventually phased it out for electric wipers, but for those early years, every thunderstorm came with a side of adrenaline. And that's part of the Galaxie's charm. It wasn't perfect, far from it.
But every flaw told a story. Every odd feature made you remember it. And the next quirk?
It was sitting right beside the steering wheel, disguised as a gear shifter. Coming up, shifting gears wasn't just mechanical, it was practically an art form. 3. The 3-on-the-tree transmission that defined a generation. Today, shifting gears is effortless. Paddle shifters, electronic dials, even voice-activated commands. But in the early Ford Galaxie 500, changing gears was a ritual. A hands-on dance between driver and machine. And it all started with something called 3-on-the-tree. Instead of placing the gear shifter on the floor like most modern cars, or even between the seats, Ford mounted it right on the steering column. It looked like a simple lever, but using it was anything but simple. You had to know the pattern, push up and toward the wheel for first gear, pull down for second, then back up again for third. Mess it up, and the car let you know with a nasty grind or a stalled engine. But for those who mastered it, the experience was deeply satisfying. There were no computers smoothing out your mistakes, no digital safety nets. Just you, the clutch, and that column-mounted lever. It demanded focus, finesse, and a little muscle memory, The kind of thing that made you feel like a real driver. And here's the bonus. That quirky shifter meant the entire floor up front stayed wide open.
No center console.
No gear tunnel. Just a flat space and a full bench seat that stretched across the entire front cabin. You could slide over to your passenger with ease, something that's almost unthinkable in today's bucket seat world. It wasn't just about design. It was about connection. With your passengers, with the car, and with the road. Every shift reminded you that driving wasn't supposed to be effortless, it was supposed to be fun. But while the interior gave you space to stretch out, the roof overhead came with a hidden trap, one that would silently destroy more Galaxies than any engine failure ever could. Up next, how a stylish vinyl roof became a ticking time bomb. 4. The beautiful roof that ruined everything. At first glance, the vinyl roof on the Ford Galaxie 500 was pure class. It gave the car a sleek, upscale look, like a convertible that never had to mess with hydraulics. It was the kind of design touch that made your neighbors glance twice when you pulled into the driveway. Elegant, smooth, and just flashy enough to stand out without shouting.
But under that refined surface, a silent killer was waiting.
You see, the vinyl wasn't just decorative, it was glued directly onto the bare metal roof. No full sealing, no protective layer underneath.
And that meant one thing: moisture.
Rain, humidity, morning dew, all of it could sneak under the vinyl and get trapped between the soft material and the steel roof. And once water was in, it didn't leave. Over time, hidden rust began to bloom. At first, it was invisible. Maybe just a few tiny bubbles under the surface. But by the time most owners noticed, the damage was already done. The steel had turned brittle, eaten away from the inside out. What looked like a perfect roof on the outside was often a flaky mess underneath. This wasn't just a Ford problem, it happened to a lot of cars in the 60s and 70s. But the Galaxie 500 wore its vinyl top so proudly, it became one of the most recognized victims. Many classic Galaxies today still bear the scars, or worse, had their roofs replaced entirely. Still, despite the risk, owners loved the look.
And you can't blame them.
That silhouette, vinyl roof against chrome trim, is burned into the memory of an entire generation. It was a design that aged beautifully, even if it aged badly. But while the roof was quietly rusting, the rest of the car was holding up like a tank.
And the reason? Ford didn't build this interior out of plastic.
Coming next, when dashboards were metal, knobs clicked with weight, and cars were built to last. 5. Real steel, real style. Inside the Galaxie's cabin. Step inside a classic Ford Galaxie 500, and one thing hits you right away: weight. Not just in how the door shuts with a satisfying clunk, but in the feel of everything your hands touch. This wasn't some cheap, plastic-wrapped imitation of luxury. This was the real deal. Back then, car interiors weren't built to be lightweight or disposable. The knobs were metal. The trim? Real aluminum or chrome-plated steel. Even the dash had hard edges and a cold surface you could knock on and hear a solid thunk in return. Every switch, dial, and vent had heft. It felt like it would last forever. And many of them did. Turning a radio dial wasn't just a click.
It was a click you felt. Pulling a lever had resistance.
Adjusting the heater felt mechanical, because it was. You weren't pushing buttons, you were moving hardware. Sure, this added weight.
And in the winter,
that shiny dash could get colder than the outside air. But it all added up to a feeling modern cars have all but lost: durability. The kind of they don't make 'em like this anymore feeling that makes collectors obsess and restorers smile. In today's cars, plastic dominates. Panels flex. Knobs feel hollow. But in the Galaxie 500, everything felt built to survive a generation of use, and somehow, most of it did. But this solid, no-nonsense construction wasn't just for comfort. In fact, Ford had another audience in mind. One that wore badges, carried radios, and needed a car that could take a beating on the daily. Next up, how the Galaxie 500 became a police powerhouse, chasing down criminals with full-sized muscle. 6. The V8 cop car that ruled the highways. It might have looked like a weekend cruiser or a cross-country family hauler, but the Ford Galaxie 500 had another life, one that was far less relaxing. In the 1960s, it became one of America's most trusted weapons in the war on crime. Police departments across the country saw something in the Galaxie that civilians didn't: power, space, and toughness. With available big block V8s like the 390 and the legendary 427 cubic inch engine, this wasn't just a patrol car. It was a full-blown interceptor. Some versions could top 120 miles per hour, more than enough to chase down speeders, bootleggers, or anyone foolish enough to run.
And it wasn't just about speed.
The Galaxie's full-sized frame gave it serious presence. Officers had room for radios, rifles, shotguns, and gear, and they could sit in comfort while doing it. The heavy-duty suspension was built to take potholes and curbs without flinching, and the brakes were reinforced to handle the stress of high-speed stops day after day. In black and white paint, with a siren bolted on top and a spotlight mounted near the windshield, the Galaxie 500 looked downright intimidating. On a lonely two-lane highway, seeing one in your rearview mirror wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. This car could catch you, no matter what you were driving. It was big, loud, and built like a battering ram. And for a while, it was the face of law enforcement on America's roads. But even all that muscle couldn't compete with the one thing Ford gave the Galaxie that no other car had at the time, a name that reached beyond Earth. Up next, how the space race inspired the Galaxie's name, and why it still sounds futuristic today. 7. The space-age name that made the Galaxie iconic. It wasn't just the engine, the size, or the shine that made the Galaxie 500 stand out. It was the name. Galaxie. Not Galaxy with a Y, but Galaxie with an IE. And it wasn't a typo.
It was marketing genius.
In the late 1950s and early 1960s, America was obsessed with the final frontier. Satellites, rockets, and astronauts dominated headlines. Kids built model spaceships, families gathered around TVs to watch NASA launches, and the future felt like it was just one moonwalk away.
Ford knew exactly how to tap into that feeling.
By naming their newest full-size cruiser the Galaxie, they weren't just selling a car, they were selling ambition. It told buyers this wasn't a machine stuck in the past. This was sleek, futuristic, built for the modern world, with just enough chrome to look like it belonged on a launch pad. The Galaxie wasn't a science project, but it felt like science fiction made real. A road-going spaceship for the space age. Even if you never left Earth, the car made you feel like you could.
And that feeling? It stuck.
Long after the space race cooled down and the Galaxie name faded from Ford's lineup, the mystique remained. Say Galaxie 500 today, and people still picture fins, rocket-inspired taillights, and a roaring V8 carving through open highways under a starlit sky.
It was more than just a name.
It was a statement, and a perfect one to close the chapter on a car that defied every expectation. The Ford Galaxie 500 wasn't just built for the road, it was built for a moment in time. A time when cars had muscle, quirks had charm, and every curve of chrome told a story. It was bold, flawed, unforgettable, and that's exactly why it still turns heads today.
Got a memory of the Galaxie? Drop it in the comments, we're just getting started.